record button so I do not forget. All right. Hello, everyone. And I'm going to say good afternoon, but I know depending on where you are, it could be a morning or evening. That's the beauty of doing online webinars. You have the option to join from everywhere in the world. So welcome, everyone. I'm Vanita Lucas, co-founder from Data ChangeMakers. My partner, Frederick, who is in Australia, it's very late for him, so he was not able to join. This is amazing because today we are launching Data ChangeMakers Live, our brand new webinar series that will invite people from the community to share impact stories, talk about their experiences, and also give you some practical um, tips and tricks and how they've learned about various topics. Um, I've also have some of my team members here with me, Valerie and Jessica. So thank you for joining. So today we have, and again, I'm just so thrilled that this is our first webinar, and a topic I think that so many people are interested in. Somebody was telling me yesterday, not a day goes by when I don't hear the word AI so many times, and I think that's just where it is today. And so today we're going to be hearing about agentic coding for data visualization. And just before we get into the real fun stuff, just want to tell you a little bit about Data ChangeMakers. We have been around for a year. Formerly, we were part of the Viz for Social Good team. We are a Canadian nonprofit, but work around the world and work with mission-driven organizations and really help them build data-driven solutions. My vision, our vision is every single nonprofit charity can really take advantage of the data that they have to really make informed decisions and drive their missions forward. We have a fantastic community of volunteers from all around the world, and that also makes us very special because we could have a charity in India, but we have people from around the world working on that social cause for that charity. So today I'd like to introduce our speaker, Steph Suiranga, also fellow Canadian. Steph is an enterprise and data analytics leader. We were introduced to Steph on the most recent project that we did with KT, an Indian charity that does greenhouses in a box and supports farmers to help cultivate their agriculture. Until then, had not heard about Steph, but he just came in and was an amazing contributor to the project. He actually really opened up our eyes to how AI could be used. And so thank you, Steph, for agreeing to share all your knowledge with us. And I am going to turn it over to you. And also, everyone, we'll keep the Q&A till the end. So please put your questions in the chat, and then we'll be monitoring that and probably have about the last 10, 15 minutes or so to answer your questions. And lastly, if you are new to Data ChangeMakers, please join us. We'd love to have another change maker with us. Follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe. We have projects starting all the time. So if you're a data professional, different skills, please do join us. There's always room for new volunteers and to learn more about how you can contribute your skills to a worthy cause. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and I will turn it over to you, Steph. Again, thank you and welcome.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Okay, can you see the full slide now? Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with me today. My name's Steph, as you know by now. I've been around data for most of my career. I've been involved in various data for good organizations over the years, and most recently, like Vanessa said, as a volunteer with Data ChangeMakers. I've also been around AI for quite a while now. I'm going to show you how agentic coding tools like Claude Code can transform how we do data analysis and build dashboards. I'll do a live Claude Code demo. It's early on in the presentation, and then I'll walk through a real case study that we just finished up for KT that Vanessa just mentioned. By the end, you'll have an idea of what agentic coding is and see how it can accelerate your data analysis projects. Here's the roadmap for the next 45 minutes-ish. We should be able to complete on time. We'll start with what agentic coding actually is. If you're coming from a Tableau or Power BI world, this stuff might be a bit new. We were just discussing before I started here that AI really is just kind of inevitable. It's creeping into just about all areas of tech, and business analysis and viz creation is no exception. So if you're wanting to stay in the game, you do need to learn this stuff. It's not meant to replace you as professional data analysts or viz makers, but what it does do is takes care of the heavy lifting, and gives you sort of this, if you already know what you're doing, it gives you like a 20x boost in productivity. So things just get a lot faster. And then later we'll have an honest conversation about the limits and risks of using AI. It's important to sort of be upfront about that. And again, why your existing skills as data practitioners are more valuable than ever. Let's start with some context. So you probably used GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT to help write code. That is AI assisted coding. Agentic coding, which is what we're talking about today, is closer to a bunch of robots doing the coding for you. Sorry? Okay, sorry, I thought I heard something. There have been three waves so far. First was autocomplete tools like Copilot and VS Code, where they kind of suggest the next line of code as you type, which was helpful, but you're still doing 95% of the thinking yourself and the heavy lifting. Then came things like chat assistants like ChatGPT, where you copy and paste code back and forth between the ChatGPT window and your IDE, which was better, but you're still the orchestrator, and the context can get lost in the shuffle. Agentic coding is kind of the most recent wave. Tools like Claude Code, CLI, and OpenAI's Codex operate directly in your terminal. They can read your entire code base, write across multiple files, run your tests, see all the errors, and fix them for you, all in this loop that goes on in the background. You describe what you want to do to the agent at a high level, and the agent goes off and executes it. So you're not really coding anymore. You're now the orchestrator or the conductor. It works extremely well under the right conditions. But again, it's kind of a recurring theme. It's it's effective if you're effective. If you already have the domain knowledge and the technical sophistication to understand how to build good, do dashboards and do proper data analysis, it's a major productivity booster. If you don't come from that world and you just kind of throw that problem at agentic AI, it can be a disaster. So you've got to stay wary. Um, Here's the kind of practical workflow of what it looks like when you're using one of these tools. You open your terminal, type Claude, and then you're in a conversation with an AI that can actually see your entire project. You give it high-level instructions like build a cohort retention plot. And it goes off and reads your existing code and figures out your data model, generates the code, and runs your test suite. If the tests fail, it reads the error output and fixes the code. Um, you're describing what you want, and the agent figures out how to implement it across your code base. And it happily remembers context across your entire project. So when you go in and out of these code sessions, it remembers what you were doing and knows exactly where to pick up where it left off. This is the pipeline. It should look familiar. This is sort of the general workflow that you would follow when you're using agentic coding tools. It looks familiar because it's the same as what we've always done as ETL traditionalists. It's just not you doing the work anymore. The thing that's sort of different here is this is an AI-friendly pipeline. So it's using artifacts that are easily consumed by the AI, stuff like Python code for the ETL and Viz libraries. So just think Python libraries. Traditional GUI tools are not as easily accessed by Claude. At the moment, tools like Tableau and Power BI are mostly opaque or really difficult for AI to read directly. Although you can still use the AI to generate stuff like DAX and LOD expressions that you can then cut and paste into your desktop tool. It's just not as much fun. Okay, so I'll show you a live demo. I'm going to be using Claude Code in the VS Code IDE. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with that. By contrived here, I mean we're going to use a small but realistic data set that we can get through in 5 minutes. Claude takes a while to sort of think about things sometimes as it's building these things. We're still doing real analysis, but the way you do it is the same thing you would do in any project, just slightly scaled down. Okay, so let me just unshare. I assume people can see that. That should be my VS Code IDE. Just minimize this. Everybody see it okay? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Second. Okay. So again, you don't have to be in an IDE. You can just work at the command line. I like being in an IDE because I kind of like seeing what Claude's doing with my project files, but it's optional. So you don't even have to have VS Code or any IDE for that matter installed. I could just be typing this out of the command line as long as Claude is installed on your laptop. So the first thing we want to do here is.
So is it possible to zoom a little bit?
Oh yeah.
Some people have issues seeing.
Let me zoom. Is that better?
Maybe a little bit more.
I think that's the max, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh, you know what the problem here though is? Let me just try something different. Somehow in annotate mode. The cursor.
No.
I probably should have thought about this before. Let's try Zoom.
Someone said, yeah, someone said you can try it in Zoom.
Yeah, I just forgot yeah, unfortunately, it only gets you so far.
So much. Okay.
Oh, that's upsetting. Okay. I should have thought through that.
Oh,
I
no
don't know
worries.
if is that
So it's
legible
fine.
at all? Yeah.
We
Can you
can
make
try to zoom on our side. It's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. I think also if you're on a monitor versus laptop, right, that makes a difference. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, please proceed, Steph.
I mean, it's not critical here that you see what I'm typing. I'll show you the artifacts that are produced by it, which are going to be much easier to see. So now that looks a little ominous. I typed in Claude dangerously skip permissions. This is a thing in the AI world. It just avoids a whole lot of annoying prompts that slow you down. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's not the safest approach, but for the sake of the demo, we're fine to use it. Okay, so it opens up a Claude session, and this project already has the sample data in it. So it's just it's fake data based on an animal shelter intake process. So they bring in cats and dogs, and then they're there for so much time, and then they have this outcome status associated with them. So whether they were adopted or euthanized or transferred to a different shelter, that kind of thing. So it's a very simple data set. There's only 300 rows in it, but the only thing that kind of is going on in this project right now is the data is there itself in raw form. And also there's this thing called a Claude MD file. So the Claude MD file is the sort of it's the guidance you give to the AI when it's building a project. So you put in a very sort of natural English way, you explain to it what you want it to behave like as it's executing the project. So here you can put in things like, follow best practices for Viz design. In this case, in the demo you saw earlier, I'm saying just generate these things quickly so we don't waste too much time. But it's the guidance for Claude to follow as it's building your solution. Every Claude project or AI project would have this. I don't know what the analog is for Codex in the OpenAI sense, but it's kind of all modeled the same way. All these frontier model companies all kind of compete. It's like a feature arms race where they all end up looking the same at the end of the day. Okay, so we've just got our data. I am interested in summarizing what's there. Now, the good news is you can make spelling mistakes because it's an LLM, so it understands that I've misspelled the, and it doesn't care. It just figures out what I'm really trying to say, and it goes off and does the analysis for me. So here we're getting a summary of the shape of the data. So again, we mentioned it had 300 rows, 8 columns, and it gives me some statistics. Here are how many cats and dogs. Looks like we got a bunch of spelling mistakes for cats and dogs. Weight, it's just kind of giving me a profile of that data. And then it kind of suggests what the next step might be. So here it's asking us if we want to clean up the species column and show me the bad rows. We can also do things like, just clean them all up at the same time. We're just telling it to clean up all the data anomalies. It's pretty quick. I mean, we're not dealing with a lot of data here, but it gives you an idea of the interaction that you sort of follow when you're building projects like this. The whole thing is like this. You're pretty much always just interacting with the prompt here, and it's just kind of generating files in the background. There we go. So it looks like it's cleaned up. It's normalized our spelling mistakes, cats and dogs. It's going to give us a breakdown, a summary of what it's fixed. So it's changed some casing. It's found some zeros that probably mean nulls. The important thing is when it finds zero in like a weight column, you don't want to be assuming the animal weighed 0 kilograms. So you need to remove that, make it a null or not a number so that it doesn't get aggregated up in your median calculations, average calculations, stuff like that. And it's flagged some missing values. That's great, right? So moving along, let's see what the data actually looks like. So we'll just say, show me distribution of species. So here it ought to be creating a plot for us. And sure enough, there's the plot. Pretty simple. It's using Seaborn in the background. But it gives you an idea, especially if you're just kind of doing this casual exploration of the data. It's just, you can be doing this in a tool like Tableau pretty efficiently, mind you, if you know what you're doing. Or you can just tell the AI to whip up a chart for you, and then it quickly orients you and gets you to understand the profile of the data. Very helpful. Sure, break it down by outcome, which is the next thing it's suggesting. I have one of the dependencies here is Quarto, so it's like an R Markdown rendering library. So that's what we use next to generate a report of our data analysis. Okay, so here's the outcome. Did it create created a chart for us as well as a table. So we will click on that too. It's, I wouldn't submit something like this, but again, we're doing casual data analysis, and the takeaway here is it's never great the first time. It's a process of continuous refinement. So you iterate by using the prompts. You say, I want to see a different view of this. I only want to see one. Maybe I'm only interested in the percentage chart. You can make the chart. You can customize it to any level of detail that you want. And I'll show you an example of how that works in a sec. But the point being, yeah, it's a refinement thing. You're constantly sort of pushing back against the AI and saying, fix this, fix that. But that's where your data skills, your analysis skills are so essential. Okay, so we'll try to generate this report. We'll use a more specific prompt. I'll call it, yeah, I'm going to tell it specifically to use Corgo. Again, like I know in advance I have to start the preview server that comes with Cargo. So I don't have to go off and figure out how to call it via command line. I can just say start the Cordial server. And the AI just figures it out. Oh, and you can see it's coming up with errors, and when it sees an error, it just fixes it, right? So you don't have to even worry about it. It's just able to deal with it on the fly. Okay, so there's our page. Let's see what it looks like. I don't know why that comes up. I'm gonna make it go away. There we go. Again, this is, a nicely sort of, well, reasonably well rendered report. I don't know why the emoji's stuck in there beside the word cat, but it's a starting point, like it always is. So the point being, there's a way to sort of render this stuff.
How are you?
And now we're sort of getting into this idea where you're getting closer to something like a vignette that you can hand into the client and say, hey, this is what we found. We have some questions, but here's what it looks like. So that's the gist of that. I'd better get back to the slide deck. Let me just unshare that. Go back to the presentation. Okay, I assume you can see that. We're good again? Okay. So now I'll just kind of dump into the last project that we did with Data ChangeMakers. This is the Katie project that Vinitha mentioned before. They're an Indian-based nonprofit that provides affordable greenhouses to smallholder farmers. My sort of piece of this I was able to do in a week using the techniques that we just saw. But again, to a much higher degree of refinement because it wasn't obviously good enough to hand in the early stages. So again, it's just a constant sort of refinement process to get to the point where you want it to be publishable. It also included extra features. So it had a deployed website out in Azure for the dashboard that let the Katie staff upload new data files. So it was much more than just a dashboard project. They had 10 years of operational data, crop seasons, farmer demographics, income records. They needed a dashboard to show funders their impact story. Key challenge there was the sensitivity of the data. So no individual farmer records could be exposed in the atomic data. Everything had to be aggregated. And the audience wasn't specifically technical, so it had to sort of have high level sort of broader appeal. Here's the architecture. Again, it's the same thing that we saw before, but specific to the Katie project. So in this case, raw data in the form of Excel files flow through Python pandas pipeline that normalizes income, converts currency, calculates retention cohorts, and outputs aggregated JSON. That JSON then feeds this D3.js dashboard. So I am using D3 here. And again, we kind of talked about that before. D3 is a programmatic library. It's just, very, very friendly to agentic coding. You just basically build up your viz one piece of code at a time rather than the desktop experience you would have in Tableau or Power BI. The whole thing runs on Azure's free tier as a static web app. It's using for the ETL, it's got some other stuff like Azure Functions and uses blob storage. So KD staff can upload updated data through a role-protected upload page without needing any technical knowledge. And this whole thing kind of runs for about $1 a month, which is quite reasonable. All of this was built, all the different steps I mentioned were all built with Cloud Code. Okay. Here are some of the prompts I used to build the solution. You can see their high-level descriptions of business logic, like add PI validation. That's enough for Claude to generate all the Python files on the right-hand side. It's just a constant process of building this up. And the project grows over time as you keep issuing prompts. For the ETL phase, Claude goes off and reads the Excel files, figures out the data model, and generates the complete pipeline in code. Loader's PI handles the data cleanup. It normalizes different spellings for states and imputes missing values like farm size. Calculations PY is a library of reusable statistical functions that get used by the transformation layer to create the aggregations for the plots in the dashboard. Everything's vectorized with pandas, so it's nice and fast. Claude is, I had it build an incremental merge system. So again, we talked about that before. So staff can upload partial year updates. That all worked well. All this was, again, natural language prompts with Claude. Phase 2 is the metric calculations. That's the analytical engine that kind of sits behind the dashboard. So retention cohort analysis is particularly interesting. Here I told Claude to track what percentage of farmers come back for a second, third, or fourth season, grouped by the year that they join. It figured out the right dates from the data all on its own, and even added a minimum cohort size filter of 10 farmers to avoid noisy percentages from tiny cohorts. The partial year annualization was an actual requirement from KD. So farmers with less than 300 operational days get their income projected at 75% of capacity utilization. So that's an example of a kind of a business rule that I had to explicitly tell Claude to follow because Claude couldn't figure it out from the data alone. It's just not there. Phase 3, this is kind of where things get more interesting for this audience, I would think. So again, many of you probably use Tableau or Power BI on a daily basis. D3 gives you this pixel level control, but has a steep learning curve. So that's where Claude comes in handy. It flattens out that curve dramatically. I prompted for 10 different chart types, and it built each one of these from D3 primitives. For example, D3 doesn't have a native box plot, and the chloropleth plot is open source. So you're kind of using those things and feeding it data, but you do have to build them up one layer at a time sometimes with D3. There's also kind of a grammar-friendly grammar of graphics that you might see in R, for example, and ggplot. There's something similar in the Python world. Sorry, not Python world, but the D3 world has something called observable plot, which lets you sort of build up things like box plots off the shelf, which I've since been using in a different project. So you have to sort of shop around for the best graphics packages that kind of get to where you want to go, but it doesn't really matter. It's just it really comes down to how much prompting you have to do. But you can get to the same place no matter which library you use. Okay, so phase 4 was just kind of everything else. So I had Claude make wireframes for the dashboard. Also that's where all the building and the infrastructure and the testing came in. But wireframes were particularly cool. So Claude generated an interactive HTML wireframe file. It wasn't just a static mock-up, it was like an actual working prototype with placeholder data showing what each of the 6 tabs in the dashboard were going to end up looking like. And that became the blueprint for the actual dashboard, which you'll see in a second here. For infrastructure deployment, Claude wrote bicep templates. I just kind of told it where I wanted it deployed, and I said, go put an Azure in it. Went off and wrote these bicep templates, which is Azure's infrastructure as code deal. And then it wrote all the unit tests and used a web navigator tool called Playwright for all the end-to-end testing for the dashboard UI. I told Claude to follow best practices for Viz design and gave it a file with the KD brand colors so it knew how to sort of brand the dashboard. Again, Claude keeps it so if you kill a session, it can pick up where it left off. Okay, so here is the before and after state. So on the left side is the wireframe that the AI created. This is one of the tabs that you're looking at here. So the right side is what the dashboard looked like after several more iterations with Claude. So this is where your experience as a Viz designer becomes essential. You still get from the left to the right by using Claude prompts, but you're coaching Claude to get to the end state that you see there. So it's quite dramatic, the difference after several iterations. This tab itself wasn't too bad. It maybe took me about a dozen prompts to get it the way I wanted. This was a different story. So this is the cohort plot. So it was tough for Claude. You can see in the bottom left that it kind of drew a simple column chart grouping on cohort year, which is functional, but a little boring. So it took quite a few iterations to get to the 2 plots on the right, which I think are much better. And again, it's just Claude's good out of the box. It gives you a starting point, but you do, depending on the complexity of the plot you're trying to make, you do have to push it. So this type of thing may have taken me, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 prompts to get right. But importantly, I didn't have to write a single line of D3 code. It was just a conversation with Claude. That's the important takeaway here. I know I don't have to know a lot of these languages anymore, especially SQL, Python, all that stuff. AI is getting to the point where that is a solved problem. And there's a perspective that, well, you can't really trust the code that these AI agents are writing. They tend to be full of noise and nonsense, but that's changing rapidly. And we're sort of getting to the point now where this is all very viable. Where it falls short. So here's our honest conversation. Inference. So this is the danger zone for agentic AI. You can just say to Claude, find me some interesting inferences in the data, and Claude will quite happily go off and do that. It uses knowledge that's been trained into its model combined with web search to come up with insights. It's much harder to apply guardrails for this than in the previous analysis phases that we saw. There are advanced techniques that you can apply to keep the inference grounded, but they weren't applied for this particular project. Instead, I included a very visible caveat, the banner at the top of the page, which is basically saying, look, did this analysis that may be of interest, but it's far from conclusive, so take it with a grain of salt. Again, it's important to put these types of caveats in the document unless you are prepared to sort of stand behind what you're seeing, and that requires a certain level of sophistication and being able to do research. And that research, obviously has to come from different places and be well vetted before you can make any assertions about it. So I always wrap those types of things in a claim like that, or a disclaimer. So, okay, it falls short. So Sometimes Claude will try to do the simplest thing in the absence of you giving it clear instructions. I had to explicitly encode design principles in that claude.md, that memory file that guides Claude. Things like don't use pie charts, don't use any dual axis plots, even though I broke that rule once. Also keep the visual clutter to a minimum. You can actually tell Clyde, go off and do some research on best practices and incorporate that into your workflow, and it will happily do that too. Even then, I had to tweak the plots, decide which metrics were important, fix up the annotations, that kind of thing. All about your sort of experience that you bring to the table. AI can implement any visualization that you specify, but it can't always figure out which visualization is right for the story you need to tell. That's your expertise. Understanding the audience, the data, the narrative. So it's a gap between building a dashboard and building an effective dashboard. It's all about oversight. We did just touch on this, but it bears repeating. The most dangerous failure mode for AI is analysis that sounds right but isn't. It can very confidently make claims about things that it's come up with and try to bamboozle you into accepting it, but you've got to constantly always be on guard. For example, in the climate resilience tab, in the Katie project, Claude decided that farmers earn 35% more during monsoon season and attributed it to this protected growing advantage, meaning greenhouses shield crops from rain while farmers with no greenhouses struggle during drought. And it's a completely reasonable sounding theory. But when I pushed back, I found that prices were actually lower during monsoon season. The income boost was driven by higher yields, not protected pricing. The AI had no idea about non-greenhouse farm conditions so it wasn't able to make any comparisons. So it just kind of guessed. So that was an oops. And again, that's why domain experience matters so much. If I hadn't known enough to challenge the narrative, that plausible but wrong inference may have gone to the funders. So that would have been bad. Other risks beyond the inference problem, there are 4 other categories worth talking about. So hallucination. Yes, at one point, Claude cited a World Bank purchasing power adjustment to justify one of his calculations, and it sounded authoritative, but it's not actually a thing. So you always have to verify your citations. Annotation drift. The dashboard includes written insights under some of the charts. You may have seen those little yellow boxes that talk about insights, those things with the big banner on the top that says, be careful about this. When Katie updated their database, these narratives got stale. So static text, which is what that was, in a dynamic dashboard is basically a maintenance drop. Got to always kind of watch out for that. Data privacy. Without explicit constraints, Claude can potentially leak individual farmer records. I'm being pretty mean to Claude here, but this applies to any agentic tool that you might be using. That's why it's important to implement PI validation at some level, or at least it was in this project, to build it right into a pipeline as a gate so that it can't accidentally be overexposed by Claude. Overconfident framing, we kind of talked about that a little bit. So AI presents everything as definitive. I had to add certain disclaimers like this is AI generated, consult with an expert. Talked about that. It's especially critical, like we said, when founders or funders are using this data to make investment decisions. So now it's about your skills and why they're so important. Agentic coding doesn't replace your skills. They make your skills more valuable. All we're doing here with AI is removing the bottleneck of implementation so you can move a lot quicker. One way to think about division of labor, column on the left is what AI does well. So things like boilerplate code, it does a good job writing code. It builds charts from specs, writes tests, builds your infrastructure scripts, cleans your data. These are all tasks that normally might take you 60 to 70% of the time when you're building a project like this. So that's the sort of gains you can expect to get by using agentic AI. Column on the right is what you have to bring. So data modeling decisions, dashboard design, domain specific business rules, that kind of thing. Most importantly, you need to know whether the visualization is misleading, inappropriate. You probably already have the skills in the right-hand column. Agentic coding just kind of removes the implementation bottleneck, so you can spend more time on design and the stuff that makes the dashboard great. All that notwithstanding, and there were some controls in that Katie project that kept the data and Claude honest, but if you want to really hone in on some traceability and auditability around AI projects, you have to think a bit more out of the box. So how do you really keep Claude on the rails when you're doing this type of stuff? So the stuff we've seen so far works quite well for casual data exploration. But what if we want to do something more formal? So what happens if we want to apply some basic data governance so we can be even more confident in the analysis? As mentioned, AI is very good at hallucinating. It can confidently produce a statistic that was never actually computed. And just realizing how scary I'm making this all sound, but it's not. You just need to sort of wade into it, and you'll understand its limitations and its implications for productivity. A median might sound plausible, might be derived from nothing if you're not careful, or from the wrong data. Sometimes Claude just completely makes up things to make you happy. I've experienced that. Even when a statistic is real, you can't always find the script that produced it. So you have that traceability problem. So 3 weeks later, you're grepping around for an hour trying to verify a number that's in the viz somewhere, which is annoying. Findings can go stale. So you applied a cleanup rule to the data that changed the median value, but the viz still has the old value and nothing flagged the drift. So you've got to be able to deal with stuff like that. Missing caveats, like don't forget to treat -999 as null when computing a median age for people. This might live in Claude's previous session conversation, but if you restart Claude, they can get lost sometimes. It remembers a lot, but not always everything. It's actually got a name for it. It's called the vanishing context window problem. It's getting better. Context windows are getting larger, but so is the token budget. Okay, so in AI's defense, of course, we're all humans. We all have the same problems. We forget things, we calculate wrong, and we make stuff up all the time. So how do we keep it from going off the rails? We want our analysis outputs to be rad, so we want them to be reproducible, auditable, and drift resistant. Reproducible, so every claim we make about the data needs to point to code that recomputes it from the raw value, the raw data. None of this, I forget what query I ran to get this number. Instead, we want to run a validation script to reproduce the number that either matches what the viz says or doesn't. Auditable, so every claim has to have an ID. I'm describing a framework here, but I'll talk about that in a sec. But every claim would have an ID with a revision history. When did this number change? Why? What did it used to be? All in version control, so it's all on record. When a finding gets superseded, the audit trail is always available to explain how. Drift resistant, so every claim has a data contract, a source file, filters, columns, expected row counts, so that when a data source gets updated, row count checks fire before any previous calculations are considered valid. And silent corruption is minimized, and any kind of drift will fail very loudly with error messages. But you do not get this out of the box with AI tools. You have to kind of incorporate it yourself. To that point, if you're feeling brave, you can use this scaffolding project that's up on my GitHub account that I've been working on. So it's called Analysis Kit. It has all that stuff we just talked about, all those controls for traceability and reproducibility. It'll keep evolving over the next few weeks as I kind of tweak it, but it's perfectly usable right now. You can just download it and its explanation of how to use that would require a whole other webinar, so I won't go into detail here, but it does come with full documentation, so you can always just get Claude to read it. My gift to you for putting up with my talk. Every numeric claim like median rating is 4.2 gets a finding ID, a function that reproduces it, a data contract that we talked about, it's all there, which filters apply. And then there's this validator that kind of replays each finding against any new data and compares that to the previous value. So you know if you have any drift. If it's different, you get, like I said, a big error message. And it doesn't rely on AI's judgment to do the validation. It's purely deterministic based on running code. So you're not in a position of having to wonder if the AI is making something up for you. While building the framework, I actually tested it against the KE project, and of its original 35 findings, it caught 3 stale ones, claims that had become wrong as the data evolved, and that project's validator hadn't quite flagged. So that's the kind of thing this refill catches. I can paste a link to the chat here. For anybody who's interested, go ahead and clone it. Absolutely free. And that kind of brings us to the end. So some takeaways just to wrap up. Agentic coding is a newish approach. I mean, it's very well established now in the sense of its maturity. It's definitely well beyond the sort of autocomplete days. It's a fundamentally different way of working, where you describe, like we said, the sort of what at a high level, and the agent kind of figures out the how for you. Secondly, it excels at implementation, but as we've seen and heard about, it's not as good at dashboard design. That's where your skills come in. You still need to make those critical decisions about what to build and how to present it. Third, most danger failure mode. I keep repeating this, of course, but it's that plausible sounding analysis that's actually wrong. So you always have to challenge the AI-generated narratives, especially when they draw causal conclusions, which are always dangerous. Fourth, it's the most important one. I would say that your skills as data practitioners become even more valuable in this mode, not less. The bottleneck that goes away, like we talked about, is the implementation, the heavy lifting, the code writing. The bottleneck that you're kind of left with, of course, is the domain experience, design thinking, and the analytical judgment. That's all still on you. At this point, happy to take any questions. You can hit me up on LinkedIn too. Quite happy to connect and have any kind of chat you want to have. But that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steph. I think just by the chatter in the chat, like there's just a lot of questions and a lot of your interest. So thank you so much. I know, Valerie, do you see any questions, any themes there? I think I saw some around tokens. But, go ahead, I'll let you.
Yes, so we have a couple of questions. This one, are you prompting which specific libraries to use? What do you mean by shop around to build unique charts?
Sorry, could you repeat the last half of that sentence?
Sure. What do you mean by shop around to build unique charts?
Oh, so yeah. So the first part of that question is yes, you are telling Claude. There's 2 ways to go about this. So if you already know which libraries you want to use, so that might be Python packages. Like in my case, I use DS3 or just sorry, D3GS. If you already know, you can just simply tell Claude to use those things. You just type it in the prompt, or you put it in that memory file. And then every time Claude starts a session, it reads that memory file and it goes, oh yeah, okay, you want me to use this graphics package. The other thing you can do is say, hey, Claude, do some research for me. Figure out what the latest and greatest packages are for rendering plots and come up with an evaluation of the top 3 and let me make a decision, or go ahead and just do it. So it is strange. It's a paradigm shift for sure. Like you can actually think of Claude as a little group of research assistants. You can almost, it's dangerous, but you can start to think of it as a person sometimes, and you can start to get into a conversation that um, gets a little strange because you're not used to talking to a system like that to get a result that you're trying to get, but it's doable. It surprises me all the time how you can, with very little prompting, get Claude to go off and think about the best way to solve a problem, and it usually comes back with something really good.
Thank you, Jessica, for the question. So another question from Jonathan. So how do you control your token usage?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a trap, right? So I am all in on AI. You can use cheap versions of this, but I use specifically, I'm right now using a Claude Max subscription. It's about $120 Canadian a month. It's metered. But that's my thing. Like I use that, to do actual work in my day job. So um, yeah, I have it's got a token budget, so you can run out if quite often I'll be working on two applications at the same time while working on a research paper and doing something else. All that consumes this token budget. And if you run out, you can bump up. So there have been months when I've had to kind of go to the 20x plan, which is $240 a month. But then the next month I can come back down. So, but if you compare that to what it would cost you to hire a bunch of co-op students or other employees, there's no you just that's it's just obvious, right? And like I said, Claude's just gotten that good that all of this is very viable now. But again, the big caveat emptor here is you have to know what you're doing and what you're seeing before you can use a tool like this. You've got to know how to keep the guidelines there. Otherwise, it can just go off on a tear and invent all kinds of crazy stuff, and you'll never know.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is also answering Sanya questions about cloud subscriptions. So you're using the paid one. And
Yes.
another question for Sanchez is, did you hit any limits while building it?
Did I what? Sorry?
Did you hit any limits while you were building the
No.
dashboard?
No. So the token budgets are quite generous. I rarely like what would it have cost to build that dashboard if I kind of did a rough guess? About 5, 6 days worth of work. But again, it's just background. So I'm always working on more than one thing at a time. I don't think it would have cost me more than $30 to do all that in actual terms of actual charged amounts to the token budget. Yeah, about $30 Canadian. Something really, it's really not that bad. And again, you don't have to do it that way. These agentic AI tools are, like I said, they're sort of the newest generation, but I'm sure everybody's experienced ChatGPT, and you can do all this that way too. It's just less efficient, right? And you can do that on the free accounts or the really cheap accounts.
Okay, thank you. So Stefan is asking, can Claude do all or most of the QA and UAT?
Yeah. So that's where it kind of shines. So one of the great things it can do is write all your unit tests. And historically, developers have hated that, right? It's just they've always seen it as extra work, and I've never been able to convince them that it's actually a work saving measure. But yeah, it's quite good. But again, you have to sort of come from that world, so you have to know what a good test looks like. You have to know what good sort of end-to-end testing on the UI level looks like, so you can sort of make sure Claude's doing the right thing. But I mentioned I used a UI, like a navigator package called Playwright, and Playwright is you can make it do that end-to-end test. So basically, you say to Claude, "Hey, come up with all these roles that you can imagine for this system that we just built." And come up with narratives for all of those personas and then play that. Just have it go through all the personas, all the scripts, the narratives, run it through the entire UI, actually interacting with the widgets on the UI, and let me know if you find any problems. And by the way, if you do find any problems, fix them. And let me know when you're done, right? It's fantastic that way.
Okay, thank you. I think this is also kind of answering Jessica questions about, she's curious about your review process, like how does Close provide all the code, or you are reviewing line by line? So do you use any prompting to review? Like, what's your general process when you're working on those type of projects?
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways to sort of vet what Claude's producing. So one is, yeah, if you come from a coding background, you can always read the code. That's why I have my IDE up and running. Like I like to see kind of what it's doing. But it's amazing how little you end up doing that at the end of the day because you're just moving really fast. And if you start having to sort of go back and second guess everything Claude's doing, you lose that efficiency. And you would only do that if you had to. And like I said before, we've kind of reached the point in the sort of evolution of these tools where it does such a good job that very rarely do you have to actually go back in there and inspect anything anymore, right? So what you do instead is you kind of come at it from the other way. So if you want to do like the thing I did with the Katie project before I built this validation framework, I just used more than one method to come up with the aggregates, right? So I used, a little library. I forget what the name of it was, but it's this Python data profiling thing. And it can basically go in there and it can aggregate things in your raw data and tell you the answer. And then over here, using the sort of Python pandas approach, I do the same thing and I make sure those values match, right? So you can get some peace of mind that way. But that combined with the sort of different styles of testing, like the UI testing that we talked about, all these things kind of combine. Like you're building all of that robustness into the project that you would in any well-designed software development project historically, right? You're still applying all your best practices. You're still making sure that you have traceability, that you are writing all the unit tests that you need for the coverage that you need, and that you're doing proper UAT.
Okay, thank you. I have a questions about hallucination, though. How do you review and confirm that you don't have hallucinations in your data made up numbers?
So that is exactly why I sort of started working on that validation framework. So that analysis kit is your defense against hallucinations. There's all kinds of techniques depending on what area of hallucination you're talking about and what kind of the body of work is behind it. So if it's data, a framework like I built will always sort of make sure that any calculation it derives is reproducible. And it'll make sure that it's the same amount if you refresh the data. And it'll actually rely on real code to do that check. So it won't just be, hey, Claude, does this number make sense? Like that's when you get hallucination problems. You have to actually ground it. So you either use code specifically that never changes, that just runs the same way every time to verify a calculation, or if you're working with documents, that's when you get into this whole area of RAG, right? So RAG is this retrieval augmented generation, they call it. So it's meant to, if you're sourcing data from unstructured documents like, Excel or not, sorry, Word documents or PDFs, like corpuses of information in document form, that's where you really can get problems with hallucination with these tools. So you have to take special measures there that, again, it's just this whole other body of work around AI. And it's a whole other web conversation. I just built a fairly sophisticated RAG pipeline for the whole purpose of making sure that it wasn't making stuff up and reporting the wrong information to the user. So it really depends which area of the AI or the supporting data that you're looking at.
Okay, I think we're running out of time. We have so many questions, but thank you so much for answering those questions. It was really interesting, and we all learned a lot about how to use Claude for Agentic and how to build those amazing dashboards.
Yeah, sure. So I think I put my email address in the slide. Maybe feel free to email me or just hit me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any questions. It's fine.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
thank you so much, Steph. So the recording will be made available in our YouTube channel, probably within a day or so, as well. So please feel free to rewatch or share. And again, if you're interested in becoming part of Data Changemakers, you are all welcome to join and learn. It's a great place to learn, safe place to learn. Not many opportunities are given to you like this at your day job. So I think, yeah, you have a lot of fun when you work on a Data Changemakers project, and you get to meet some wonderful people like I have met through the last years. People like Valerie and Jessica and Steph, and just people around the world. So it's just an amazing opportunity. So thank you, Steph. This was just awesome. I'm gonna go and start playing around with Claude right after this. Maybe I have to eat lunch first, but great. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and I think we'll sign off now.
Great. Thanks a lot.